When Mum first started suffering with this this problem, she went to the doctors, and they thought initially that it was going to be something like pneumonia. So they actually treated for pneumonia, and eventually she got an X-ray and followed by a scan, which did actually show up a shadow on one of her lungs, which they then did a biopsy for and found it to be this life-threatening disease called mesothelioma. This is a terrible illness which is normally caused by the person being subject to asbestos fibres somewhere in their working history. My dad, he was a demolition guy. He used to go around sort of taking all the houses down in Derby area, making way for new builds. And they would just blatantly go in there and chip off the asbestos, pull the place down, great big clouds of dust, as you can well imagine. It would be in their lungs, it would be in their hair and all the clothing. And Dad had finished his day's work, no washing facilities at work, so he'd go home as he'd finished work, take off his dusty clothes, covered in dust from head to foot. Mum, being mum as they were, she'd take the clothes, stand at the back door, give them a right good shake, and then chuck them in the washing machine. And it turns out that this was the downfall. Mum actually picked these fibres up from my father's clothing. We then spoke to the doctors about this. They looked further into it, and it turned out that this was more than likely going to be the case. Obviously they wouldn't say anything, but it meant that we had to get involved, a solicitor of some description. I trawled the internet and looked at quite a few, eventually coming across the Dedicated Asbestos Solicitors, speaking to a guy who was just a guy to me then, John Daz. John came up to our house, very relaxed atmosphere, better than going to an office or anything. He was really, really thoughtful. And we then sat down and I explained to him that Mum had this problem with the chest pain. It was eventually scanned in and found as mesothelioma. It sort of suddenly just got worse and worse and worse, and eventually within 8 months of being diagnosed, unfortunately she passed away. John went away with the information that he got from us, and obviously information from my father, to obviously sort out where people had worked, where my mum had worked, where my dad had worked, so he could actually put a case together. But John was absolutely brilliant. He was on the phone the next day, and probably a couple of days later, just wanting little snippets of information. Then we got our interim payment, which was quite handy, helped out with the bills. John was in contact quite a lot, really, and none of it was difficult to deal with. He always asked the right questions. He never asked questions in a way that would upset you, especially when he was talking to my dad, because obviously my dad was a bit uptight, because he actually now realised that the problem was caused by his contact with the asbestos. We actually used the fund that John got us, which was a six-figure sum, sorry, not a fee. And the fact that the whole thing was done on a no-win, no-fee basis. It was absolutely brilliant, and I would recommend it to anybody.